Hello and welcome. Now the lights go crazy. It's my most favorite and least favorite moment of every event, standing under the lights. I'm meant to be in the background, people. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here at Cranbrook Art Museum. We're absolutely delighted to host our friends at Landmarks Columbus for this wonderful, wonderful event. Oh, sorry. They couldn't understand you. My name is Lila Catelier. I'm the curator of public programs here at Cranbrook Art Museum and the master of ceremonies for this evening. I am really going to keep it short. We want to make sure that we have as much time for this conversation as possible. And so this book is a sort of moment we're thinking about Columbus, Indiana as this place of connection and community and the way that design and architecture bring people together. And we really feel such a sort of siblinghood with Columbus here at Cranbrook. And we were so excited to sort of make the connection between Eventually Everything Connects and American Modern sort of coming out at around the same time. So we were really, really delighted to invite them to come and make this presentation. So with that, I will introduce Richard McCoy.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight and listening to our program. We're really delighted to be here. My name is Richard McCoy. I'm the Executive Director of Landmark Columbus Foundation, and it's really a privilege to be here at Cranbrook. We've had a wonderful day looking around Cranbrook. You're so fortunate to have this facility and this institution in your community, and it's a great night to be thinking about modernism and what's it mean to be modern, not only in the past, but in today's world. I said we had a great day today. Thank you to Lila for arranging this. We had an awesome tour of part of the campus by Cranbrook star Kevin Atkinson. And of course, that got a chuckle. I think everybody knows Kevin around here. You just say his name and everybody is happy. That's nice. We'll try it with Andrew. We also had a great time with Andrew. And Bridget Bartel, who showed us around the exhibition. So I'm excited to be here with my two colleagues, Jamie Goldsboro, the creative director who's going to talk to you about this book, and also our special guest, Ben Weaver, the director of the Miller House and Garden in Columbus, Indiana. So we're bringing a little bit of Columbus to you. We have a bunch of photos. We're going to keep this somewhat casual, and then we're going to have a conversation afterwards. And we're really here to celebrate a book that we published last year, American Modern, Architecture, Community, Columbus, Indiana. And so we're excited about that, and just having it connect to everything. Eventually everything connects. It seems like a fitting moment. We're excited to bring the Cranbrook crew to Columbus later this fall. And so we're also delighted to have two of our board members here today, Betsy Baker-Lasky and Tracy Haddad, both of who have long connections to Columbus and grew up in Columbus. Thanks for coming and joining us and representing our board of directors. So the way our program is going to go tonight is I'll tell you just a little bit about Columbus, an overview of what we're going to do. Then you're going to hear from Jamie, who's going to tell you about the book. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the preservation efforts that we do in Columbus, about a program we call Exhibit Columbus. And then Ben's going to come up and tell you about Miller House and Garden. And then after that, I said we'll have a Q&A. It's always that moment of truth when you test something out and you're convinced it's going to work, and then you go to make your first button press, and nothing works. It's no problem. Hey, it worked. Okay, that's me. This is Columbus. It's a town in southeast Indiana, a population about 50,000. I'm not going to go into great detail about Columbus, but I just want to say, like your institution here that has a couple key protagonists that lead the story. Our story in Columbus has a couple of other key protagonists. One of them, most notably, is J. Erwin Miller and the Cummins Engine Foundation, or the Cummins Inc., which has a foundation that has supported architecture in Columbus after World War II until today. We'll get a little bit into that in a minute. But I also want to just give a shout out because we were talking just a few minutes ago with Andrew. I think this movie, Columbus, screened here maybe in 2017, and it's another great introduction to Columbus. We were excited a couple years ago to host a 5th anniversary celebration of Columbus, and we had the director and John Cho and Haley Lou Richardson come and present at North Christian Church. So Columbus is a very special place, and through a lot of effort, we were able to raise some funds to produce this book, which for the first time tells the complete story of Columbus. And so in that, we engaged a writer, Matt Shaw, who is the former executive editor of Architect's newspaper, a well-known photographer named Ewan Bond, and a graphic design studio out of Brooklyn called Studio Lynn. And so here to tell you about the book is Jamie Goldsboro, who, like Andrew, went to undergraduate in Indianapolis at the Herron School of Art. And then Jamie went on to get her graduate degree in architecture from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She currently is, and forever will be, the creative director. Well, she may have other titles, we'll see. But she is the creative director at the Landmark Columbus Foundation. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everybody. It's great to see all your faces. I'm Jamie. Thank you for being here. As Richard said, I'll just walk us through the book and tell you a little bit about the writing, the graphic design, and photography. I'll just start to say that we did have 2 big launch events. So the book launched last July, and internationally, and we had a kickoff event at the former North Christian Church in Columbus. So many of the community came out. We had maybe 300 people there. I love to project on the ceiling of North Christian too, and we had Ben set it up really well with archival Gerard pieces. You can see the seating area and the cross, and also flower arrangements. Following that, we also had a book launch event in Indianapolis at the Christian Theological Seminary, which the Miller family was part of founding. And so another modernist location in Indianapolis, and this way we had 2 launch events in Indiana. We also visited the New York Center for Architecture earlier this year, I think in the winter. And now we're grateful to be here with you. We produced some extra ephemera for the book too. These were also designed by Studio Lynn, and these are commemorative silkscreen posters. They are still for sale. You can go to our shop if you'd like one. We'll ship you one of some of the iconic buildings. So you have Southside Elementary, First Christian Church, which is the cover, and then First Baptist, Harry Weiss. And this is an additional poster, which is also the interior cover. So when you get the book and you open it, you'll see this really amazing graphic collage. And Matt Shaw and Alex Lynn of Studio Lynn spent a lot of time in the Columbus, Indiana Architectural Archives looking through not just architectural archives, but the graphics component of all of the work that happened in Columbus, notably by Paul Rand, doing work for Cummins Inc. Every time a new building was built, they would create beautiful pamphlets for the opening day celebration, for example. So this poster, also still for sale, it's truly, like, you could get lost in it, right? Of all of the graphic marks and symbols and ephemera. And then I want to mention, this is essentially like a building index that you'll find in the back. And when we were working on the book, we were thinking, how do we even choose what are, the major buildings, the buildings of significance to include? And so this is essentially an image index with date, title, and information about the architect and if it had an addition, for example. And I want to mention some of the things that Studio Lynn did to really, he packed in a ton of information in this book, and I think you'll see it when you walk through it. There's a lot of historical photos, a lot of newly commissioned photos, a lot of graphics, And to notate sort of those historical images, we have them in this kind of sepia, and then newly commissioned images. So it's very much a catalog of what's in Columbus and in the built environment, also including public artworks by Henry Moore. Most buildings, some landscapes as well. And then also how Alex Lynn laid out the book. So we have a lot of historical imagery. So again, definitely looking back in time, looking through archives, references, and then combining that with a film strip of those significant buildings today. So this juxtaposition of old and new, and then these film strips will come again at the end of the section in these big photo essays. So you have history backed up by some contemporary images, and then we review those large E1 bond images in large sections in the back of major projects. So every chapter is broken down in that way. So that's kind of how you digest all of the information. I want to look through a few of Ewan's photographs. He visited Columbus 4 times in all seasons. So what was amazing is to have Ewan Bond, world's best architecture photographer, right, hop in a plane because we had fresh snow. So very cool. He was very dedicated, him and Matt, trotting around town. You can see in the back is the home that Mr. Miller grew up in, family home. Here is a aerial view of the Miller house and garden. Here you can see the house and the garden by Dan Kiley. This is Mill Race Park. It's a 85-acre park right in downtown Columbus. Landscape by Michael Van Valkenburg with structures such as the amphitheater by Stanley Stadowitz. I can't remember the architect of the bridge, but a covered bridge. Also in the park, and the round pond here. This is the Commons Mall. It was renovated in 2008, so an original Caesar Pelli building. Probably one of the first times a super block was mentioned at that time of big-scale super block architecture. And when this was renovated, they kept it down to the steel structure, so you see still some of how the building was formed, and then essentially reskinned it, reprogrammed it. This is Pence Place Apartments. Saraland. This is a large, I'm not sure the acreage, but a very large recreational park that was built for Cummins employees. This one kind of, I don't know, I just love the idea that, a corporate America builds a rec camp for the employees, which is now open to the public and still very much used. So there's a big basketball field house, RV park, all sorts of outdoor activities, fields, softball fields, things like that. Schmidt Elementary School, Fire Station 4, everybody's very familiar with. Love to see it in this way, a little bit in the context. This building really sneaks up to you when you're in town. I think we all see it kind of very frontality. When it's depicted in architecture, we're really talking about the thing, but it's in a very regular place. Columbus, the Regional Mental Health Unit. Over here, over the bridge, there is a really beautiful movie, or beautiful scene of this building in the movie that you might remember. We got First Christian, of course, in the background of the DQ, which Detroiters know, Michiganders know. Cummins Engine Plant. This is also essentially right downtown. City Hall, beautiful cantilever. Columbus Signature Academy Fadria campus. So now we're talking a little bit about the schools in Columbus, that building, the interior of the engine plant, which, right, when I think of Con or I think of Detroit, I very much think of large industrial, building that is happening, and you think of all the architecture that's coming out of this industry at the time. Miller House and Garden, the North Garden. Ben's currently raising funds to replace the trees. Interior of the Miller House. Ben is a really great musician. He's playing the piano. Here is a concert on Library Plaza, so IMPA building. The plaza is very much a community space. It's nicknamed the Living Room of Columbus. A lot of concerts happen there, community events. It's also on 5th Street, which is known as the Avenue of the Architects, where you have IMPA, Saarinen, Roche. Everybody's on that road, right? Here so not just our buildings, but also our bridges. This is the entrance into downtown, a really beautiful view when you're coming through. A very populated river. A lot of people do activities along the river. Oh yeah, here we can see coming through town. One of my favorite stories is my mom, her first time visiting, said, the drama, because you have the bridge that frames the courthouse back there and the church tower, and it's beautiful drama. Southside Elementary School, which was originally built as a middle school and then became an elementary school. This is Central Middle School. This is my walk to work through here. Got some middle schoolers playing football in St. Peter's Church in the background. Smith Elementary. Currently, our elementary schools are going through renovations. So this is one of the schools that just broke ground on renovations, and actually one of these tubes is moving, but they like to tell us it is staying. You will be able to see it still. They're kind of just enclosing this courtyard to have more usable interior space. Here again, you can see the significant architecture in the everyday, right? So we have Harry Weiss here, and then now Dollar General. And then one of the newest buildings is a home. This is actually my home. It was built by Grant Gibson. When I moved to Columbus, I was lucky enough that it was for sale for me. And continuing that legacy, like, what's the future of, architecture in Columbus since the Millers had decommissioned from the city and sort of left in 2008? So there are a lot of new projects happening, such as this, a lot of energy in town to continue that legacy. Richard will tell us more about some renovations that have happened, some preservation that's going on, and I'll let him come up now. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Just before we dive into the next topic, I think one of the things that the book does well, in addition to a 40,000-word essay that we're sort of leaving out of today's talk, is that it shows a window into Columbus in a way that we know it or that you live it. And so this is why, we were really excited to share some of the photographs, and Jamie's quick sort of run through them allows you to kind of think about Columbus as what it is. If you know Columbus well, it's been photographed for decades. Balthazar Korab was there really from 1950 or 60s up for decades, and there was a book that was produced about that. And it's these very sort of formal, heroic shots of architecture. And if you know and live in a place in the same way, if you know and work here frequently, you know that it's the people that make a building special. And so I think when we look at Ewan's photos and we think about the book and what it's trying to do, it's trying to give you a window into a place. And ultimately, I think we make our emotional connections to places through people. And so we really love the book and hope you'll consider looking at it. So we entitled tonight's talk, The Columbus Update, and it's a way to maybe talk a little bit about what's going on in town and how our organization is thinking about that in partnership with many others. So we don't own a significant building in town, but we work in many of them and help care for many of them. And so what I wanted to do was maybe to introduce a little bit of how we think about preservation. And maybe this is a conversation we can have later. We don't call preservation in Columbus historic preservation. We have coined a term progressive preservation, which is a community-based effort to care for heritage. So what we want to do is to educate and advocate. And so the history of Columbus has been design incentives, not design control. And so, for example, in the state of Indiana, there are 50 historic preservation commissions that allow a city to landmark a building and then control its destiny. There is no historic preservation commission in Columbus. None of the buildings are protected, 7 of which are National Historic Landmarks, and many are on the National Register. So I would argue part of our traditions and values are based on the idea of a community coming together to care for things. This is why we think the book is important, and the way that Jamie framed it was so good, is that it explains that it's at once an index and a catalog, but it's also a narrative story and a window into what's going on. And I am cursed again. Oh, there I am. So this is an unsightly thing, if you look at it in a certain way, as an architectural friend. This is First Christian Church, designed by Eliel Saarinen with, of course, his family's help. And that is the church tower under construction. This was a huge accomplishment for us because the church was faced with a multi-million-dollar problem of what we anticipated, a $3 or $4 million problem to restore the church tower. It had become structurally unstable, and there was some concern bricks would fall off and hurt people. The church, being a pragmatic place, considered tearing the tower down. The thought was that it might be a burden to future congregation to have an expensive tower that served no church function. Our organization stepped in with a number of others, including our community foundation, and said, hey, what if we help raise the money for this project? Would you save it? And so they said, yes, we would consider it. They also got an estimate for what it would take to tear down the tower. We ended up raising 2/3 of the $3.2 million to restore it from outside of the church, and 1/3 of it from inside the church. And so this is an extraordinary thing. And as some told us, without the church tower, without Eliel Saarinen's building in Columbus, the story of Columbus is severely jeopardized. And so we were glad to be able to do it, and we're glad to work with a photographer here. Sure, we love Iwan Bond, but these are all photographs you're going to see from here on by a man named Hadley Fruits, who graduated from Cranbrook in photography. And so this is folks working on the tower, and then just a sunset view of a fully restored tower that is improved and we think available or now ready for future generations, or 50 to 60 years of life in Columbus. And it was a huge win for our organization and the entire community. This is another example of a challenge. This is Harry Weiss's former Irwin Union Bank from 1961. It was among the first drive-up banks in Columbus and probably in America. Those 4 towers, the 4 sort of towers are what is original. The 2 in the front are not original. And for folks that like to anthropomorphize things, this is called the dead horse. The Miller family commissioned this bank along with a number of banks in town. Unfortunately, in the financial crisis of 2008, the Miller family lost their banking enterprise, and all of their banks were sold out. And if you think about how you bank and how you bank mostly from your phone these days, banks are challenged. So this building was vacant for a while. Our organization worked with truly a mom and pop coffee shop and encouraged them to restore it. They put it on the National Register. They put a lot of sweat and equity in it, and it's now one of the best coffee shops in town. So it's a great example of adaptive reuse. The horse it's not going to ride again, but it's there. Yeah, I don't know where to go with that joke, sorry. As Jamie mentioned, the schools in Columbus, 14 of the 17 schools in Columbus, soon to be 18, were built with support from Cummins, Inc., the idea was Cummins wanted to incentivize good design in town. So they allowed the school corporation to choose an architect from a list of 5, and then they would pay the design fees. So in a way, incentivizing great design in Columbus as a way to improve the school system, and the idea that a better designed school will allow people to have a great education. Sound familiar, Cranbrook? And so this idea then is challenged today with the adjustments that are needed in schools, a growing population, a need, unfortunately, to have dramatically increased safety in elementary schools because of school shootings. And also a need for mental health in schools, and also STEM. And so there's a $250 million renovation of all of the schools in town. And so we're working with the school corporation to find ways to adjust the schools in a good way. And so this is John Johansson's 1969 Smith Elementary School. For better or worse, the majority of that interior courtyard will be filled with a new building. This is the challenge of working with buildings and elementary schools. Here's just another peek into the school. One of the ways that we try to support this is that we've commissioned a local writer in town. She's not local by any means. She's really from California and writes all over. She's been writing the history of every single school in town. And so then we have a meeting, a progressive preservation talk about school, and Glenda Winders tells us the history of each school. So we're about 6 schools in. Our goal is to get through them all and to do it by 2027, when the 18th school is opened. There's a new elementary school being built in Columbus by a Boston-based firm called Howler-Yoon Architecture. We're very excited about that. Another thing that we've decided to do is to turn, in a way, the idea of a guided tour inside out. We have something called local social design trips, or if you're cheeky, LSD trips. The idea is that we invite people from the community to give the trip they would like you to take. And so this is Jared from our Historical Society telling us the history of Jewish residents in Columbus and their buildings that they owned that in some cases are no longer there. We've been doing this for a while, and we also just recently, for the past couple years, we've been looking at Black heritage in downtown Columbus. Many cases, histories that have been forgotten or erased. And we added 10 markers in downtown Columbus that celebrate 9 Black businesses and a speech in 1873 by Frederick Douglass. And so we had a ribbon cutting celebration just a few weeks ago with our mayor there in the center. And the woman to the mayor's left is Miss Paulette Roberts, who has been championing this idea for the better part of a decade. This was a very good day for our organization. And then, as Jamie mentioned, North Christian Church, one of the other icons designed by Eero Saarinen with interiors by Alexander Girard and landscape by Dan Kiley. This and spring with the magnolias in full bloom. This ceased to be a congregation in 2021, and just recently it has become a branch of the county library system. This is an interesting proposition and one that is evolving. It's an extraordinary building and one of the beacons that shines bright from afar in Columbus. These are just gratuitous pictures of North Christian Church. And this is, again, just another interior. It's hard not to, when you have all these images. Sorry, we're just going to show you things. But we do a lot with our church and that church and the congregation. We've done landscape cleanups. Ben Weaver has been instrumental in helping us do that. We work with him to organize ways to help take care of the grounds and to the property. But this was a unique day in Columbus here. You see people looking up towards the spire. This was the day, in fact, that the cross was removed from the top of the spire, which is an interesting move. It's one that the library chose to do in a way to deconsecrate the church and to turn it into a library. There's been some debate whether or not the cross should have stayed at the top, but in a public building, it was decided it should be removed. We've done a lot of work on North Christian Church. In 2019, we were fortunate to get a Getty Foundation Keeping It Modern grant, which allowed us to hire Prudhomme and Partners from New York to do a 400-page document that is a conservation management plan, which will guide the future of the plan and breaks things down into some simple terms that we can all understand. Red, please don't touch it. Yellow, think hard. Green, you can adjust this. And so this is part of the conservation management plan and how we're working with the library to think about what the sanctuary can be and how this property can evolve into a more public space. And then just to talk about some things that maybe aren't going perfectly. This is Eero Saarinen's 1954 Irwin Union Bank and Trust, a bank that arguably revolutionized the banking process. It was among the first glass-walled banks in America. These 9 domes make up, and just as a note for architecture nerds, the white covering is not right. The roof is being worked on at this moment. It still looks cool, I would argue. Just because I'm giving cheeky details, sometimes locally this is called the Brazier Factory. So I can't. In any case, it's a wonderful building that had an addition in 1973 by Kevin Roche, John Dinkeloo and Associates, and it was the headquarters for the Irwin Union Bank and Trust for many years. It has been vacant since the pandemic, and so we have in the middle of our town an iconic building awaiting its next use. Being an adventurous guy, I convinced our board of directors, wouldn't we like to go look at this building? And so this is actually some of our board of directors. There's Nick Sprague in the jacket, walking down the stairs. I think we all decided it was a pretty big, it's the better part of an entire city block. It might just look like that square building, but it's actually a big, so I could not convince our board that we should buy this building and move in there yet, but we have Tracy and Betsy here tonight, and we will start anew. I'm sorry, Tracy and Betsy. In any case, it's an extraordinary building, but some buildings also don't make it. This is a 1966 building by a lesser-known firm called Fisher and Spillman, which was another part of the branch system of Irwin Union Bank and Trust. When the bank was lost, it became part of a car lot, an auto sale, and then we knew it was going to be destroyed, and so Hadley Fruits went and documented it inside and out. But it was destroyed. This is another sad story. This is Hardy Holtzman in Pfeiffer, one of their few buildings. There's another Hardy Holtzman in Pfeiffer building, an extraordinary elementary school called Mount Healthy in Columbus, but this was an early building of that trio called Cummins Occupational Health Association. In short, it's where Cummins employees went to get physicals. You can imagine some 50 years later, they needed a different building, and they offered it for sale for a number of years. No one purchased it. It also has a landscape by Dan Kiley around it. There you see some of the trees in bloom. It was a quirky interior space with multiple levels, really purpose-built as a medical facility. It was never leased, and it was sadly destroyed. I show you these projects not as a way to celebrate their destruction, but just as a way to have a conversation about successes and failures. One of the things that we're really excited about, and I'm going to talk about this quickly, and then we'll get to really the star of the show, which is the Miller House and Garden. In 2016, we started a program called Exhibit Columbus. And this idea was we wanted to put an infusion of new art and architecture throughout the city. And we wanted to leverage this legacy and get some of the brightest thinkers today and to give them a little bit of money to make an intervention in Columbus that communicates with the building and with the legacy of Columbus. So this has been an extraordinary way now for nearly 10 years to invite people to Columbus to think about what's next. So I'm going to go through a couple things. This is a long description of what Exhibit Columbus is, but in short, it's an exploration of community, architecture, art, and design. It's an extraordinary opportunity to explore these things. We do it in a way modeling the design process. We have a symposium where we invite everybody in. In fact, our man Kevin Atkinson spoke at the symposium in 2018. We have, geez, this guy. And you got to woo. And then we have these design presentations where the participants come back and show off their idea, and then we have a free exhibition that allows people to see these ideas. And so I'm just going to quickly run through some of the projects. There are, for the sake of tonight, there are 4 main projects. There's the J. Irwin and Xenia S. Miller Prize, We award this to 4 or 5 firms every 2 years that show extraordinary commitments to community architecture, art, and design. This is a project on the 1981 steps of the SOM City Hall by Bryony Roberts Studio, who made a project called Soft Civic, encouraging people to find new ways to engage with their government. This is a project by Tatiana Bilbao Studio from Mexico City that encouraged people to think about new ways to engage with the library. Yes, you can hold a ball and hula hoop and dance in the library. This is a really interesting project by a duo called Dream the Combine, which challenged the ideas of what Columbus means. This is called Columbus, Columbia, Colombo, Cologne, and each one of those poles are kind of geographic representation of a place that references Columbus and unpacks the idea and the challenges that the history of Christopher Columbus means in the world. This is a temporary classroom in front of a middle school by Ecosistema Urbana. This is a project, kind of a material exploration by a university professor. So there's Miller Prize folks, and then there's university professors. We invite university professors to bring their technical research to Columbus and show it off. And so that's what these projects are. Sometimes they're community engaged, sometimes they're material engaged, sometimes they're about hanging out or being in a different spot. And then this is one of my favorite projects we've ever done. This is a huge project, and it was built entirely by high school students. We work with our high school students, 6th graders, middle school students, to get them engaged in their history and past and the future, and then allow them to build something. This is called machi, which is a Japanese word that means busy downtown. They wanted everybody to interact with this space they created in a grass lot in the middle of downtown. We also engage with 5th and 6th graders who last cycle asked the question of what does downtown need now? And as if you know, 5th and 6th graders, they came up with crazy ideas. This is a triple sci-fi facility. And so we made 33 of these and then put them in this trailer to be on view during the exhibition. So that's a quick look back at 4 exhibitions. We're currently building the 5th exhibition. In fact, it opens in 6 weeks. We probably shouldn't be here. We should be back in Columbus working right now. It's a big thing. And so our cycle this year is called Yes and it's all about positively affirming past stories and then figuring out how we can add to them. We thought this was a really nice thing to do in today's climate, to say yes to the past and try to find ways to move it forward. We just completed this summer a design camp where we invited elementary students to work with our staff and our curators. That's Elizabeth Blasius from Chicago. She taught them how to make miniature Gerard dolls. This is Nina John from Brooklyn, from New Jersey, one of our Miller Prize recipients who's teaching kids how to make kites. They all made kites with Nina. And then this is Charlie Vins, a Chicago-based designer who taught kids, or who actually made silhouettes of kids, which he will put out in front of a historic theater that we're trying to renovate. So we're very much interested in working with elite and up-and-coming architects, but also engaging that deeply within our community. We also work with fabricators. This is Brose Partington making an installation for Nina Cook. This was literally happening last week. That's Akima Bracken, a professor at University of Illinois at Chicago, painting what will be a giant pool that we put, a giant purple pool that we put out front of the IMP library. For folks that don't know, this is the 40th anniversary of Purple Rain. This is a transition project for me. This is a 2019 project from a New York-based firm called So Ill, and they had a project called Into the Hedge. And this had, I'll get the number right, but no one will really know. It's about 136 arborvitae trees, and you'll notice that they're just hovering above the ground. Our idea was that we would use these for the installation, and then we would later move them to the Miller House and Garden. It was an extraordinary thing that also lit up at night. And it was a pretty great place to gather as a community. The woman in the sort of the purple jacket is Anne Serac, who for many years led Exhibit Columbus. So we're glad to celebrate that and kids that are involved with it. So that's a very quick look at Exhibit Columbus. There's a list, you can all read it very easily, of everybody that's been in Exhibit Columbus. Please check out exhibitcolumbus.org. But this is our 5th cycle, Yes and. We will open 13 new projects on Saturday, August 16th. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Ben Weaver, who is the director of Miller House and Garden, and a man who spent much of his life working alongside the Miller family, in particular, Mr. Miller. He kind of has a graduate degree from one of the most iconic patrons of art and architecture in America. Ben?
Good evening. This has been an exciting day for me. The first time I've ever been to Cranbrook. I've known about Cranbrook for quite some time, and all the relationships between designers and architects that are present in Columbus. And so what a special opportunity to view the campus and to share something that's very special to me, the Miller House and Garden. Wrong way. So as Richard mentioned, we have a lot of great photography due to having Hadley Fruits on staff and being able to take pictures of the garden and the house as it's transitioned. It's been open for 15 years under the management of Newfields, formerly Indianapolis Museum of Art, and since its transition, there's been many changes that have had to take place, not only maintenance-wise, but throughout the garden and all of the Kylie designed spaces. For just a little background, if you don't know some of these details about the Miller House, in 1953, Mr. and Mrs. Miller commissioned Eero Saarinen to design a modern home for them on the north side of Columbus. They knew that they wanted to have Alexander Gerard involved because Eero Saarinen and Alexander Gerard had both just completed a lake home for them in Canada. Saarinen said, there's this up-and-coming landscape architect, Dan Kiley, and we highly suggest that you use him for this project. Kiley came in with some preliminary designs and I think is now really one of the stars of this total design. And I think that's, another comparison that we can make to Cranbrook. This is not only great architecture and great art, but there's a great landscape and all these things come together, and that's actually what makes something so special like this. The house is held up by 16 cruciform beams, so there are no load-bearing walls. That attaches to the metal work that surrounds the house and then allows for skylights to actually go through the entire house and provide natural light through the whole house. Here's the entryway, and this is where we were introduced to Alexander Gerard's contribution to the home. He was asked if he would collaborate with Saarinen, and is actually noted as one of the architects on this project. His comment was, I'd love to be involved, but I would like to start from the ground up. So the first thing we see, which would be mainly an austere interior, is this brightly colored runner that Gerard made specifically for the house. The Millers love these designs so much that this is actually the fourth reproduction of this runner, but kind of gives you an idea of what's next as you go through the house. Again, another rug designed by Alexander Gerard. This time we're seeing a version of Eero Saarinen's pedestal table, but poured in place with terrazzo, plumbed. Is this our pointer here? This is actually a protective cover right now, but this table is plumbed from the bottom and then has a fountain that works in the middle of the table and then could be used with any number of things from flower blooms to Gerard pieces. We also see Gerard's contribution coming in, making specific plates for the Millers. Something that we don't see so well is these seat cushions, but Mrs. Miller did needlepoint and requested for Gerard to make all of the initials of the family in needlepoint patterns, and completed these and added another personal touch and another detail to the dining room. The relationship between Saarinen, and also Gerard, and later a little more with Kylie, but between Saarinen and Gerard was a really great relationship with the Millers. So something we see here is a very personal touch, again going back to the textiles, but Gerard knew a lot about the family, but interviewed Mr. and Mrs. Miller and the 5 children they had living in the home, and said, when you think about your family, what are your interests, your hobbies? So we see that the Miller's last name is actually spelled throughout the rug. We see things like Gerard's sun design, the cineraria in this pot here indicating the flowers they would put around the conversation pit, and just such an interesting collaboration and friendship that the Millers had with Gerard, which lasted for quite some time, and I think is one of the reasons when now, we're going on 15 years of the house being on tour, but why we're able to represent the house so well is because they did collaborate with all of those designers as changes were made throughout their 50 years living in the home. Here's one of the most iconic character-defining elements inside the house, the conversation pit. This is a 15 by 15 sunken sofa that's surrounded by Orsina marble. This was something that Mrs. Miller was not totally keen on originally. She could just see there could be safety hazards. She knew that this was going to be their dream home. She wanted to stay here, through the entirety of their lives. And then she said, how am I going to change up my living room? If I decide I want new furniture or to change some things up, I don't think that this would really make that possible. Gerard says, well, what we can do is we can change out the pillows. So this is kind of a Victorian style method, but yes, he then was able to peddle many pillows as well, and had these darker tones in the winter with the red rug, and then we have pastel toned, mostly Gerard pillows that come in there in the spring and summer. Here's a more historical photo. We can see the cineraria lining the pit there in those gold pots. We can see the original color of the pit, which was a dark red. This was changed out to that neutral tone later on, and the Millers actually had these cushions made a little bit larger so that they could get in and out a little bit better. Kevin Roach in his office actually designed a handrail that later was installed in this area. One of the greatest features in the living room is that cylindrical fireplace. And as you can see in this photo, this was something that they actually did use quite a bit. Something that is kind of a nod to Eliel. It is off-center. It's not the main focal point of a room as a fireplace normally is. It kind of places itself in the side and joins with a screen divider so that you cannot see directly into the living room from the front door. Here's a picture of that spring and summer collection where you can see the lighter colors. Kevin Roach came in probably in the late 80s, I believe, did this rug, which has a leaf from every tree on the property. So the Kylie designed property, which is about 14 acres, has obviously specialty trees and things that were picked out specifically for the Millers or by the Millers. And so there's a nod to how important that garden space is to the interior of the house. This is a picture of the pit again, but in Christmas time, where the poinsettias are placed around, and just another way to kind of change the look of that living space. But as you can see here, we have that kind of 2 inches that come over the edge of the marble, and that's what I was speaking of when I said they changed the height of those pillows. The Millers had many, many objects. Again, we have some Christmas decor here with some Italian glass. I always say that you have to give Gerard a lot of credit for being able to take a space that is a modern space that would normally be considered probably more of a minimal designed space, and using all of these collections that the Millers had and making that work. The storage wall, based off the idea of George Nelson, the former president of Herman Miller, was expanded here with Gerard's idea of how to make this area functional, having storage for books and objects, and then, a wet bar, things that you didn't necessarily want to be seen. But knowing that the garden is so important to the space that the only area this could be done is in front of the carport. So we have this stretch, a 53-foot storage wall that includes the stereo system, Mr. Miller's violins, which he had a Stradivarius and a Guarneri violin that he would play that was stored in this cabinet. As I said, a wet bar, but then, of course, all of the different collections. Alexander Gerard's brother, Toonsey, was a ceramicist. Many of his works were displayed in the house. This is his version of a creche, which was one of Mrs. Miller's many collections. She wanted to have some sort of representation of how Christmas was viewed around the world. So she had about 500 creches on display, this one being by Toonsey, Alexander Gerard's brother. And Richard joked when I started selecting some of these photos, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm sure people really want to see the roof." And I said, well, I think when we talk about, preservation and trying to take care of these places, one of the most important things that we have to think about is obviously the roof. We have a flat roof design, which doesn't work well in this climate as it would even in Indiana. This is something in the Southwest that might work okay. But then we see all of these skylights that are dividing this space as well. So I think I have on the next one. Yeah, I think we can see that a little bit better. So this actually divides the roof up into 25 separate roof spaces. So something that we really have to keep an eye on as we're still looking to keep the garden beautiful and keep the trees where they're at. This is a very maintenance-intensive building and maintenance-intensive garden for sure. I think this will allow you to see a bit better how that's divided up. We have those bridges so that we can cross those skylight areas, but it's essentially a large 9 grid for the main part of the house, and then we have those 16 other roof spaces that go around the exterior of the house. As Richard mentioned, the So Ill project, we were fortunate enough to have some conversation early on. I was contacted by Sophie from So Ill, and she said, we want something that will be a great, evergreen that we can use in our project, but we want something that we can use at the Miller House. Well, the Miller House is totally surrounded by arborvitae, and they're surrounded by an old variety of arborvitae, which is just thuja dark green, which is getting harder and harder to find. So we were able to use 136 arborvitae and replace the whole pool section and really bring this back to life and see what this space looked like in 1963. Because although the house was designed and completed in 1957, Mrs. Miller wanted to wait until 1963 when her youngest was old enough to swim to add the pool into the space. And so now, we have another 50 or 60 years of this beautiful section, or what Kylie often referred to as green rooms, for future visitors and designers to appreciate. Here's another angle from the west side. You see the Richard Schultz furniture around. We did miss some of the public art. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the collection that the Millers had. They had around $200 million worth of art in the house. 20 towards the end of their lives, and we did have a sculpture out in this pool area, but that's, just one of the things that we have to work on as far as like an adaptive reuse. The gates, something very special. Alexander Gerard actually designed the gates to go into the pool. Through donors, we have been very, very lucky to start replacing these different areas in the Kylie designed garden. Kylie uses a lot of monoculture plantings. He is a difficult person to follow up and maintain his sites, even though they, hold such a beautiful form and especially a modern landscape. So we were lucky enough to replace the north orchard here, and then we have the south orchard here as well. So this was an original request from the Millers to have 80 apple trees put in. Their family had an apple orchard, so it was kind of a nod to that. And so as the museum thought about this, we didn't need the apples, but we could keep the same genus, and then we could also have something that would do what Kylie wanted to happen anyway, is put on a beautiful spring show. So now they have these beautiful white blooms. They're crab apples instead of apples, but they have these beautiful white blooms, and they all bloom at the same time. I think, as we see these aerial views, I think that's just a really good way to understand the garden, especially through a presentation without visiting and walking through the garden. But you can see these grids of trees that Kylie had planted outside of the north part of the garden. Due to a storm, we actually lost several of these trees, so this is the next green room that we will be renovating. But such a beautiful area. Back when antiquities could be brought back from trips and things, we see a 2nd century Roman basin used as the fountain. Here's the grid, part of that north garden, which is transitioned from tulips to annuals, then to mums at the fall part of the year. And the man we mentioned through this whole talk, Hadley Fruits, just really have to give him a big thank you for having all these beautiful photos for us to look at tonight. Thanks.
Well, thank you. It's now our pleasure to have a conversation with Andrew and Kevin. So thank you, Jamie and Ben, if you'll join us up here.
So yeah, there's so many connections. I actually went to school with Hadley at Heron's School of Art. We were in photography together, and he came to Cranbrook a little after I did. But so I grew up in Indianapolis, which is just about 40 minutes, I would say, north of Columbus, Indiana. So it's always had a special kind of place, and learning about it there. And I was wondering how many people have visited Columbus? Oh, a lot.
Nice.
Well, I guess you have to go back. Well, the Miller House is open. Back then, it was a private residence. So my other connection, I was able to tour the Miller House right before it was given over to IMA. And because I was at the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis before this job, and the great patrons of that institution, the Dayton family, were friends with the Miller family, and in fact, that inspired them to build their house on Lake Minnetonka in suburbs of Minneapolis, and they wanted to make sure that I could see it because they weren't sure. I guess it wasn't fully at the IMA at the time, but it was a really amazing opportunity. So if you've been to Columbus before that option, you'll be able to tour the Miller House now if you go. And I think Kevin was going to help point out some connections. We've already heard several, of course,
yes,
between Cranbrook and Columbus, Indiana.
And I, too, am grateful to Hadley Fruits, Cranbrook alum, as many of my lecture images for the past 6 or 7 years have been from Hadley. And really, a lot of the slides that we saw going by have Cranbrook connections. And just in case you don't have your copy of American Modern Architecture Community, Columbus, Indiana, yet, it takes all the way to page 13 before the first reference to Cranbrook. And I think that it really is this sort of amazing manifestation of the Cranbrook ideal, this vision that George Booth, Ellen Scripps Booth, the Saarinens had at Cranbrook. A logical way of viewing it would be to say that Columbus, Indiana is the conclusion of the idea, that the sort of manifestation of Columbus's architecture is in another way the fruits of the vision that started here. And I was very intrigued by the story that's told in this book, which I really appreciate the book for straightening out so many rumors, speculations, and other pieces of gossip from architectural history with well-sourced fun facts. And in it, it talks about the woman who suggested Eliel Saarinen as the architect of First Christian Church, and that she couldn't remember the name, but said, it's the Finn working with Mr. George Booth. And I love this idea that Saarinen at the time would be kind of the second fiddle to George Booth. And within the introduction of the book, it says, large portions of Columbus's architecture reflect the varieties of modernism developed by Eliel Saarinen and his students at Cranbrook. Yet rather than offering a pure stylistic commonality, the buildings of Columbus share their own utopian ideals. Architecture not of neat buildings and elite taste, but building a better society and community. And I think that that's then reflected in my short list here of architects I could associate between Columbus and Cranbrook, from Eliel and Eero Saarinen to Harry Weiss to Charles Bassett of SOM, who did the City Hall, 51 graduate, to Susanna Torre, past director of the Art Academy, and then all the sort of second ring designers like Dan Kiley, who did the Brookside Elementary School bus turnaround here. So if he started with Miller House, he ended on a much higher note, I think. And you haven't lived till you're trying to preserve trees that are hit by bus mirrors. We lost. But also Gunnar Burkerts and Perkins and Will, Caesar Pelli, Robert Venturi, all these people who have a connection to Cranbrook are Bloomfield Hills. And this symbiotic relationship between a kind of educational principle that says any art is good art if you're searching for truth in art, to then transforming it into a city that says everyone deserves good architecture. It doesn't have anything to do with class or race or social stratus. We as a community, as Americans, can have great architecture. I think there's a real kindred optimism to both the Cranbrook idea and the Columbus achievement. I do think, looking at the clock, we should swing it out to audience questions.
Yeah, I think we'll raise the lights, but I just wanted to iterate because you made that joke about the content of the book. I did happen to read the book in about a day, but it's a really great contextualization of Columbus, and it mentions all in the larger context of what Kevin was referring to in terms of the Great Society, and that's the one thing living in today's world that reading this is really what once was possible in terms of kind of civic dreaming was really what I took away from it as being one of the more profound things that maybe needs some historic preservation. But we will open it up for questions from the audience because I'm sure that there must be some.
Jamie, can you tell us about your home? That really struck me. Just two things. Where is it in relation to downtown, and how large is it?
Yeah, Richard's gonna love this. He's like, great, you're talking about your house, not the mission, Okay, I'm joking. It's a small house. It's less than 1,000 square feet, just less. It is 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. The architect, Grant Gibson, he was actually my professor in graduate school at UIC. He is a professor. He's an architect in Chicago, building mostly residential. And it is downtown, so it is on 8th Street, so I mentioned the avenue, the architect's is 5th Street, so I'm just a couple blocks up, couple blocks east. I walk to work, takes me about 7 minutes. Yeah, is that it's an awesome house, 2 cats, 1 dog, one life partner. So we're loving it. We fit. I mean, yeah, we fit in there.
Hi, thank you for a very interesting program. My concern is, you mentioned the Miller Foundation, I guess, was decommissioned or dropped out of involvement. What's the future? Is there still money going to be available for future buildings to bring in world-class architects?
Maybe I'll start that one. I think I've done a poor job of explaining the story, but I'll just try. So the Miller family lost their banking enterprise in 2008, and they started Cummins, which is now a global company. One of the sons is on the board of directors. The Cummins Foundation still supports architecture in Columbus. So the offer that they have is for any nonprofit, non-religious institution can apply to receive funds for the architecture program, and then they will receive a list of 5 architects to work on their project. There have been 4 projects that are completed or underway in the past 5 years. One is a new academic institution by the technical college in town, Ivy Tech, by Iwamoto Scott, a San Francisco-based firm. They also have a landscape at that campus by GGN, which is a Seattle-based firm. And then there's an air traffic control tower that's going up in Columbus that's designed by Marlin Blackwell Architects, a noted architect in Northwest Arkansas, and then a new elementary school by Howler Yoon. So that continues on. So that program is solid. There has never been a historic preservation commission, and ours is the first fully realized nonprofit organization dedicated to caring for the past. We will announce on August 15th, with the support from our board and many in town, we now have an endowment of $3 million for our organization, which means our organization will continue on for a long time. And so we're excited about having an organization in town that will help keep things moving forward, and will have the funds to hire a staff. So that is the current state of things, and I think it is an ongoing effort to get people interested in the story, to get people in Columbus, to remind them how great it is. And so I think that's a sort of a forever story as generations evolve and generations to come. I'm sure you have similar challenges here in Cranbrook. A new generation comes in and they value different things, and how you encourage people to care for the past is a challenge.
I'm coming, Jeff.
I hope this question is worth the walk. So I remember my design professor once said to me, or once said to the class, that the Europeans have it better than the Americans because they have their history. They grow up around all this amazing architecture and just within Europe. And it was just made me wonder about Columbus. Have you seen the impact on the people, on the kids? Have there been great designers or architects, or just has it inspired the community in any way?
I'll jump into that. Richard mentioned with Exhibit Columbus the high school design team. So Exhibit Columbus has been going on for 10 years now, and so we now see students who have graduated from architecture programs who are now practicing architecture. Mila Lipinski, she's also still working with us, managing the curatorial team. So she's on the curatorial team for Exhibit Columbus and is an architectural professional in Mississippi. And I would say, so there's many, high school decide to go on to study architecture or maybe engineering. And the high school teacher, he's very open. He teaches the kids about all the possibilities of architecture too, even if that might mean you're maybe more interested in civil engineering, or, imagine that civil engineer having the experience of Columbus. So I think of things like that. As far as little kids, they just like to get involved. The school corporation, we have BCSC days, Bartholomew County School Corporation, and they have Last time we did it in 2 days. All the 5th and 6th graders come downtown for an architecture tour, and they experience the architecture. So that's every 5th and 6th grader in the school corporation. Now we're going to do that over 2 weeks because they just trail over town and hop on the installations and things like that. So I think that sometimes you don't see it immediately. It's one of those things that just grows. And I'm not originally from Columbus. I'm a Hoosier from South Bend area. But not being from there, it's amazing the levels at which someone can engage. You know, sometimes you're just trying to get someone to appreciate something, and that might just mean teaching them about it, and that's enough. Or there's extra levels of Matt Shaw, who wrote the book. He's from Columbus, ended up writing a book about it, you know, went on to study architecture. So there's, I think, in the field of architecture too, there's so many different ways you can go. So what's great is that we're just teaching people how to be civic-minded, right, in your community.
I think I personally know 3 architects who grew up in Columbus, who worked practicing in Chicago. So it's definitely happening.
I also think that you can never discount what good design, good architecture, and quality spaces might influence someone in a way that we would never know or we would never be able to measure. And a very common refrain that I hear in working with Cranbrook's history is, oh my gosh, I went to high school here and I didn't know about it, or I didn't notice it when I was here. And I really push back on that because I feel like our buildings were not designed to be wonders of architectural history for the 7th graders to worship at the feet of the Saarinens. I think they were designed to be great places to learn and to be a good book open to the perfect page for every age. And so probably the best time to notice Cranbrook is when you come back and you think, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I want to know more about it. But when you are actually experiencing great design, great architecture, I hope that it's just the kind of perfect envelope for the great operetta that is childhood. And so that, I think, you really can't discount what a beautiful space, that kind of impact that it will have on the students. And I think that all of us who work with kids and great architecture, and some of you met my hub students earlier tonight at dinner in the dining hall, the enthusiasm that you can bring if you have great buildings on hand as teaching tools is something that Columbus and Cranbrook both have, that you have great works of architecture to go out into the field and to teach with, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I think Columbus has that. It's always the answer to the question I have, because you have something like Cranbrook, it's 320 acres. So it's not little, but it's also not a city and so or a town. And so the question I always had was, well, how much good design does it take in a city to inculcate the same kind of experience that you would have here at a place like Cranbrook, where every turn you see something beautiful. And I think Columbus begins to answer that question. And that's why I find it interesting that Ewan Bond, the photographer, wanted to focus so much on the contextualization, the kind of jarring juxtapositions that are part of like contemporary life, which I think is really, and that's what the book does too, the text. So it kind of made sense to me that, you know, Matt was trying to put this into context, that it's not just this thing here and this thing there, but that there's a whole story around it, and not everything goes according to script. And I thought that was a refreshing part of the book as well.
I think Ewan would have even liked to have pushed that more. But
Probably.
I
could see that.
I think I pushed back a little bit.
I think it leaves room for a book of Hadley's work.
Thank you. That would be great.
It's like the people who make the T-shirts at Cranbrook that say Cranbrook trash off of our trash cans. You know, there's
Right.
always something.
That's the number one complaint that I receive. I don't know why I get it at the art museum as the director, but the number one complaint is, why are the trash cans lined in Academy Way? So that's been my crusade, Kevin. If you want to join me in my decades-long crusade to
I think
banish
I'm
the
in.
trash cans.
I had a question about, I guess, the genesis of your organization. Was it like one of those situations where, like, well, we've got some great architecture here, let's form an organization? Or was it, let's form an organization to bring in great architecture?
Well, maybe I'll start that, but our organization is quite young. And so we have formally been a nonprofit entity since January of 2020. So we're 5 years old. I started working in Columbus in 2013, and there was a group of folks that were interested in these ideas, but I'll try not to tell too long of a story. But Mr. Miller passes away in 2004. Mrs. Miller passes away in 2008. The banking enterprise is lost in 2008. And by this time, that generation is, in a way, it's gone. And so I think the community is asking, what do we do with these? Are we going to be able to take care of these things? Is this a great experiment over? I'm looking over to our board members to make sure I'm getting this right. Is that it was this question, are we going to be able to take care of that? And what came of that were a couple of things. One was a re-energized idea around caring for it, but it's also, they brought Indiana University over from Bloomington, one of the Tier 1 research institutions in the state, and they started a Masters of Architecture program. And so we left that part out of our story. So there's now a Masters of Architecture program in downtown Columbus. And then through that, we started our organization. We sort of formally started to fundraise and get it going in late 2014. And so it was an effort to do it, and I think it's because there was something in the air saying is that we need to take care of this, we need to steward this amazing gift we've been given. And I think every community should think about all of the gifts they've been given from the past generation and think about how to steward those. But this was an exceptional thing that was obviously changing right before people's eyes. And so it was through that we formed a board of directors, formed an organization, had a huge amount of financial support, volunteer support, awesome staff to build something that is now 5 years old and has an endowment. And so I feel like we're walking now. We just saw one of these great murals, and it was about childhood. What was the 3 ages? So we are maybe into starting to get out of that first section.
Yes, The Gift of Knowledge by Geza Marotti.
Yeah, thank you.
I also just want to add on to that. So our mission is to care for, I would say you can break it down in 3 ways: care for, celebrate, and advance the cultural heritage of Columbus and like-minded communities. So to care for, that's our progressive preservation work, adaptive reuse, helping people rehab buildings, things like that, moving things forward, our tours, our talks, the book. Exhibit Columbus is to celebrate. This is a contemporary art exhibition. We're thinking of new ideas. We're moving forward, exciting, fun, festival. And then care for, celebrate, advance. That is a program arm we call Columbus Design Institute, which is kind of a technical service arm. You could maybe bring us in to hire an architect. So we've run RFPs for projects because we have such a great reach to the design world. Maybe the city of Columbus wants to work with us to project manage, building a ramp onto a building, things like that. So the organization functions in many kind of clear different ways to continue the legacy.
Great talk tonight. Thank you very much. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather grew up in Columbus on 4th Street across from St. Peter's. But the family hasn't been in, 15 years probably. Beyond buying the book, what else? If the family wanted to make a trip to Columbus, right, what's the best way to tap into the cultural scene in Columbus? You mentioned buying LSD on the street, but any tips, practical tips on how much time, when to go, what to see?
We didn't mention it, but we have a terrific visitor center right in the middle of town at 5th and Franklin. That's the place to start. That's where you can book a tour to the Miller House and Garden, which is an extraordinary afternoon. And that would start you when you come visit Saturday, August 16th, for the opening of Exhibit Columbus. This fall would be a really great time to come. It's in fact why we have an exhibition in Columbus is because you'll know as a museum, you have something up for 3 or 4 months or sometimes longer, but it gives people a sense of immediacy. So you got to come this fall. It's open from August until late November. And then, so we try to make it a special time to get people to come back, to get people, if it's on your bucket list, I've always wanted to go, August 16th. is the day to come. I'm sorry.
Is it, what day of the week is that?
That's a Saturday.
Which means that with the new Thursday tours of Saarinen House, they could tour Saarinen House from 1930, the Art Deco home here at Cranbrook, and then go to Columbus and tour Miller House and see father and son architect round dining room tables, round chairs, and think to yourself, oh, the curtains dividing rooms, one to the other, electrical outlets on the top of tables. Don't spill the Kool-Aid. Father, son.
But wait, there's more.
Wow.
Wait, I'm serious. I'll get the date wrong. Lila, Andrew, you're coming to Columbus
Yes.
to September
Impossible.
to do this show about
So you can
Cranbrook.
hear about our project upstairs, but in Columbus, Indiana. It's like
That's
a
right.
mind trip.
Yeah.
Thursday,
You come
September
here to
11th,
listen
as
to
a matter of
Columbus.
fact.
Yeah.
Thursday, September 11th.
Thursday,
Thursday,
September
September
11th
We'll
is
see you
another
then.
another great day to come to Columbus.
Yeah.
Which is a remarkable synchronicity because we all remember September 1st, 1961, the day Eero Saarinen died. But then Mr. Miller spoke in Detroit at the International Congress of Churches just 2 weeks later. I know. Things I found out in the footnotes of your wonderful book.
Well played.
I think that
Thank
this
you.
question is going to be our last question. We're just going to ask one more question, a few notes. There are a couple of boxes of American Modern upstairs. If you would like to purchase American Modern and you haven't yet, please feel free to stop by the shop on your way out. We'd be very delighted to see that happen. And also, yeah, again, we're going to be down in Columbus on September 11th, and it's a really, I do just want to say that Exhibit Columbus is renowned amongst the design community around the United States, and the cast of characters that they have chosen for awards and for installations is like truly incredible. They really do have impeccable taste, so I really do highly recommend. Lots of close friends of mine won awards this year and have installations this year, so this is the year to do it. This is the year to go.
Hi, this is just an extra point. I lived in Bloomington for like 35 or 40 years. Just moved here recently, and one of the things that attracted me was Cranbrook, because I had spent a lot of time in Columbus. Went over to see the buildings. I took my students. I taught architectural history in Bloomington at IU. And I'm delighted to hear about the program there. And I've been to see the Mies building in Bloomington, which is kind of an incredible, weird thing. But I'm so glad to hear about the preservation organization that's called Progressive. I just think that's brilliant. Because we started a little preservation group in Bloomington in 1976, the year of the bicentennial. And it was such a struggle, but we did it, and it's been going. I don't know right now, but we moved from saving monuments and, saving big grand buildings and whatever, and moved into affordable housing. And really, the last I've heard, we were doing small houses on the west side of town, just to keep the neighborhood vital. And that's been very successful. We had banks that worked with us. So we had affordable, low-rate loans, whatever you call it. But I did want to congratulate you on this, on the foundation, and also to say that in all those years that we went, that I visited Columbus, and I always took visitors to see it too, I always had this feeling that there was something missing. And I knew the visitor center, we always went there, but I felt that, I don't know what it was, that there wasn't actually an organization. I think that was, but I was sensitive to that, and I don't think many people would have been concerned. So I think it's a big gap that you're filling. But the other question I have is, did the Millers not anticipate this, the problems that the community would have continuing their program? And I wondered if, I just don't know, but did they leave an endowment for the house? I'm assuming so. And anything else you might have on that subject, I don't know if it's relevant, and I don't want to uncover any unpleasantness.
No. The kids certainly left an endowment for the house. I think where we're seeing the gap is on other buildings and other places throughout town that all ended up kind of needing help at the same time. I think that's kind of the curse of Columbus. You know, if you have an old city hall, or if you have one building in your town that is you know, beloved, and everybody is going to rally around to take care of that building, that's one thing. We just have so many, and it's just getting at that point in time where there's so many needs for so many different buildings.
I will second Lila's admiration of Exhibit Columbus and the various things that happen, because it really is amazing, the work you do and the attention that you garner and the publicity and the graphics. And I really love the theme, yes, and, because watching the cross come off of that gorgeous steeple, it makes sense. It's also complicated. I mean that's what a thing. And as someone who has a school mace with a screw-off cross on it, which Cranbrook has, you know, these are really tough questions, and so it's a tough thing to face, as, you know, what is the past and its influence on the present? And so I think that to have another Midwest organization stewarding so with such grace, aplomb, and focus is really inspiring. So, thank you.
We're never going to leave. This is great. You guys are so, this is great. Thank you. This feels great. Thank you.
Where did that cross end up? That was my main concern.
Richard Thomas, when he created the Cranbrook Mace, he created a Star of David, a crescent, a crane, and a cross, and a yin yang.
Yeah.
And they're on the base of the mace.
Right.
We mostly use the crane.
I was thinking the one that was taken off in
Oh,
Columbus.
that cross. Sorry. I was like, it's not lost.
Kevin Atkinson,
I was hoping the
everybody.
center would be tracking all the objects.
There's some people who would throw it.
I'll have to remember, but I believe it was, so that congregation
Bedford.
was formerly a Disciples of Christ. Ben, you should answer this, sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was a Disciples of Christ denomination, and there's actually a Disciples of Christ camp in Bedford, so it was transferred.
It transferred the property. Thank you. Now we can all go. I will sleep comfortably tonight.
The cross lives. Thank you so much to Richard McCoy, to Jamie Goldsboro, to Ben Weaver.